Hello, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
So as introductions, my name is Kelsey Hofer. I'm a PhD student in Chicago School of Professional Psychology, and this is a role play of a supervision session. Good morning, Xavier. How are you?
I'm well, Kelsey. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. It's good to see you this morning for supervision. Uh,
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing the recording of your session last week. So first of all, I loved it. I think you did awesome. But wanted us to be able to spend some time today to kind of look over some pieces of it, kind of more directly, and explore pieces that I think you did really well, and maybe some areas of growth.
sounds good.
Awesome. So let's start with thinking about some of the key concepts that you were trying to get across during the supervision session. There were some that I found that I want to go over, but would love to hear from you first. What did you notice as things like key concepts that you feel like you did a really good job with portraying?
Yeah, I thought that I did a pretty good job of just trying to like set the client up, like making sure that they were aware of what they were doing. I know like when you key components, not just of mindfulness, but of any counseling theories, making sure like your client is comfortable. And so I think I did a good job just trying to set it up and say like, hey, like this is what we're gonna do. Like, are you comfortable with these interventions? Like, I'm not gonna just say like this is what we're gonna do. I did say like, hey, I did kind of have an agenda based off our last conversation. But that seemed more concrete now after the client, told me what she needed to say and how I felt like okay, this further supports that this was a good direction that we're going in. So I tried to communicate a lot in it. I think I did a good job explaining the tenants before we jumped into like any like coping interventions and making and seeing how they did how the person felt in it and was understanding it. I think some things that I did not do well was I don't think I gave enough like attention to maybe some multicultural considerations. Like I didn't ask if the client was comfortable. I don't think I did. If the client was comfortable with some of these things, like for some people, like closing your eyes could be triggering, right? Or, for some people, like some of those mindfulness interventions aren't exactly comfortable. And I don't think I asked her if she was comfortable with those things. So I think if I could go back, I would have spent more time just saying, hey, this is what we're gonna do, which I think I did, right? Check. But then like I didn't say like, I did ask if you're okay with it, but I didn't like explain why I asked her if she was okay with it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't know if that answers all the questions.
Yeah, no, I think that was great. And I think that's a lot of what I noticed as well. I really appreciated at the beginning you kind of giving a good outline of here's the different types of mindfulness concepts that we're going to be exploring today, and that you gave choice, right? Over like, hey, here's some things we can do. Which one do you want to start with? And I think that was really awesome. And even just looking at like the timestamps of the different approaches that you used, I liked how it was really spread out in a really good way. So like 6 minutes, 12, 17, 20, 23. And there was like a good amount of time that you were able to practice each one before moving on to the next. And I think that's something that some clinicians sometimes struggle with is like, oh, we did it once, on to the next. And just because the clinician is familiar with it and able to do that doesn't mean that the client has enough time to really incorporate that.
Yeah.
So great job outlining them and having a good like time frame for them. And I on my little list of things that you did really well, I put that I appreciated that you did check in with your client multiple times. Like at the beginning, of course, like, is it okay if we practice some mindfulness? But also even like halfway in the session, you talked about the comfortability with closing eyes. And you're right, there probably could have been a little bit more backstory on why you were asking, right? Maybe some psychoeducation on how that can be triggering. But I think you just naming it and making it an option and giving the client choice was really important.
Okay.
So yeah, I think they did well. And I also like the concepts that you chose. Even though it was a virtual session, I think you were able to do a really good job with those. And that can be really hard to do, like, especially the grounding pieces, to do those virtually, I think can be challenging for some clinicians. And I really liked how well you were able to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I really just couldn't remember, like, and even as I was watching, like, rewatching the video, I was like, was I clear enough on that? Was I? So I uh definitely made a note now, just now, on just making sure that, I'm kind of thorough in some of like my reasoning for.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, at one point, around the 6.5 minute mark, you talked about wanting to share some of the science with the client of kind of why mindfulness worked. I know that there was kind of like a period of like, oh, I kind of got stuck on that, which is fine. And I appreciate you being transparent about that. But I do think that would be something great for you to go back and
Mhm.
kind of do some of your own research on like, why is mindfulness such an effective therapy approach? Because I think sharing some of that psychoeducation with your clients in the future can also be really helpful and also help with like, why is it important to close our eyes? Why is this helpful? Not that it's required, but to kind of provide some information around that for the client might help just kind of wrap that fully together.
Yeah, I agree. I got to that point and I was like, I know the answer to this, but I didn't prepare myself to have to explain why this is a thing. So I'm like, now I'm in the middle of it. So I'm like, oh, this is important. Oh, wait, I hadn't thought about the fact that this is actually important. Communicate. Oh, brain, find it, find it, find it. Right.
Yeah, and I think you handled it really well, right? And like it's okay to be clinicians who are humans. And so naming it is good. And that's also, a little maybe trick that I use that I can recommend is if I forget something, I can say, "Oh, there's an article on this. I'll send you later." Right? Which is a great way to like get them the information they need, but also if you don't know it in the moment, that's okay. Or if you forgot it in the moment, that's okay.
That's a great tip. I hadn't thought about that.
Ah, yes. One of my favorites. Um, yeah, so overall, I mean, I think that was great in terms of the key concepts that you used. I'm gonna check my list and see if there's anything else I wanted to name. I guess the other piece that I really liked about it was in the closing when you kind of like reviewed the key concepts. You then asked your client about which one could be most useful. And that was a really great way to summarize it without you just like, in conclusion, here are the 5 things we talked about. But you were really able to kind of have your client go back and think about the different approaches that she tried, but doing it in a way that is a little bit more subtle. So I really liked that and definitely want to encourage you to keep doing that. I think that was really effective.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to also check in, and you kind of mentioned this a little bit, but I wanted to be specific about exploring multicultural elements. And I'm curious kind of what you noticed that you did, because I think you did some things really well in terms of that, and maybe what you would have done differently if you could go back.
So maybe I'm a little hard on myself, but I looking back, I don't think I did a whole lot multicultural aspect. Like I'm thinking about and maybe it's because like we had this wasn't like our first session and we had covered some things before, so maybe that might be the reason why like I didn't
Mhm.
just like explore all of these other elements. But at the same time, like most counseling orientations are going to include like aspects of multiculturalism all throughout the counseling relationship, right? So I feel like I didn't do that's kind of a big mark I kind of gave against myself as I didn't think that I did enough from a multicultural aspect.
Mm,
Like I think again, like I did some vague things as far as like making sure that the person was comfortable, right? But I didn't explore elements of like what it meant to be a woman doing these different things, what it meant
mm,
in a relationship doing these things, in a heterosexual relationship doing these things, like and you know, her current life circumstances, and so I think there's some I think that could have shown more in some of like the lapsing elements of like the psychoeducation portion of being able to draw attention to those areas. And so
mm.
I think that was personally, I think that was kind of like blunder-esque on my part, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I appreciate you naming the importance of multiculturalism and the different facets where maybe that could have been expounded on. And you're right that that could have been expounded on. You're also right that we don't have the sessions before and after to be, recorded to be able to know kind of some of those conversations. And so that's definitely something we can continue to explore as we continue to kind of work with you around this client. I think something that I noticed that I appreciated was checking in with your client intentionally about their familiarity with mindfulness, right? And so I think not assuming that the client is an expert or knows nothing is really important, especially I guess I'm thinking in terms of religious identity. A lot of religions do use some mindfulness practices. And so checking in with her and not assuming either she knows everything or she knows nothing, I think was a really good piece of that. Um, and kind of allowing her to share what she knows and doesn't know. And that way you also knew where to pick up on. So I think that was something that I really appreciated. Again, that was towards the beginning. I was like 3 minutes in. And so being able to kind of from the get-go figure out where she's at, I think was really good. But I definitely agree that there could have been more areas of check-in. And again, that also can be part of a follow-up conversation, right? This was an educational session. And so that can be follow-up of like, hey, did you use those mindfulness practices? What did you think? And at that point, being able to go back into, how was it doing these as a woman, as someone in a relationship? Like those can also be part of the follow-up conversation. So I'm really glad that you're identifying those, but I hope we're not beating ourselves up too much over not having done them initially, because it doesn't mean we still can't do them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate the encouragement and
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
the attention to it. And I think that definitely helps me put some things into perspective, because I don't even think I was looking at multiculturalism even from the lens that you just expressed it. And I was like,
Mm.
okay, that makes
That's
so.
fair. Yeah. And I think that's also in some ways kind of a good clinician, that maybe you were just kind of doing some of these things because they're natural, even if you weren't putting the word multiculturalism with it.
Right.
And so that goes to show some of your strengths.
I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
What are some things that, and we've kind of named a few of these, but what are some specific areas that you'd want to continue working on as you move forward with this client or with these themes?
Um, I would probably have to say probably just doubling down on the psychoeducation components.
Mhm.
Because mindfulness is a broad spectrum, and that just because we spent time on grounding doesn't mean that we covered all the facets
Yeah.
of mindfulness, right? Especially if I'm looking at it from like an acceptance and commitment therapy
Mm.
lens or other components to it, So um I think I think there's sometimes like some like solution focus kind of seeps in, where I see myself trying to be like, all right, here's some skills and some interventions to fix it, right? To help you to navigate this, to help you to, and I think that I needed more elements of like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like as a clinician that I spoon feed, right? And instead of just like spending some time just kind of like letting the client just kind of talk more about the experience. I was like, oh, you're having difficulty focusing? Oh, well, if you don't cope, you can't function, right? And so let's talk about how you can cope. And it's like, well, slow down, like, and so I think it's probably where I would a way that I would probably want to do a better job of just working on my immediacy.
Mm.
And um yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. Is and maybe even, and I know we're talking about specifically mindfulness, but even just kind of like some emotion focused parts of it. Like I didn't take a lot of time to say like, how does, that sounds like that's stressing you out. Like, how are you managing that?
Mm.
She generally said that here are some things that are happening, but I didn't explore any of it. I'm like, let's cope.
Mhm.
It's like, well, you have to really sometimes understand why you need to cope before you can cope, right?
Yeah.
So I felt like there are elements where I just kind of gave her skills without spending as much time on like the source. So
Yeah. And I appreciate you wanting to check in about that. And again, we don't have the prior session, but I know it seemed as though you had kind of created a plan session prior to talk about mindfulness.
mhm,
And so I do think that in some ways going directly into some of that is okay, but it's part of the plan, as long as you're checking in with her about, is this still okay to have it follow this plan? And so maybe it's not that you should have done all these other things. Maybe it's more about just checking in to be like, hey, we were going to talk about mindfulness. Does that still feel like the best direction to go today? Or is there some other stuff we should explore first?
yeah,
Kind of giving those options. Um, because I hear that there's a lot of criticalness that you're saying, and I hear that, but maybe it's not as extreme maybe you're feeling, and maybe it's just more checking in with her about, is this direction still good?
Yeah. Understood.
Yeah. Um, how would you have handled this? This is not a critique. This is like a what if question. How would you have handled it if she was more resistant to some of those strategies? Because it sounds as though you built great rapport with her, you brought it up, and she was just kind of like, yeah, let's do it, and like willing to like practice all of these approaches with you, which is awesome. Like clearly some rapport had been built previously, so good job. But what would that have looked like if she was not willing to, or if she's like, oh, this doesn't feel like it's helpful, or oh, I don't really know if I want to practice all of these, or something like that? How would you have handled that?
Okay. So I think what I would have done is first explored her feelings behind why there was resistance. Like I might have said, hey, like, you seem to, we talked about 5 different options and you kind of shot down all of them. Can you talk to me a little bit more about like why there is so much resistance to to these interventions? Um, I would have done that and kind of just explored her feelings on those, right? Which is what I was talking about was I think was lacking anyway. Um, I think I would have provided more psychoeducation on the effects of coping and why coping is important, right? And again, how failure to cope can affect your functioning. And she had already said that it was kind of seeping into other areas and that it kind of was spilling over. So I was like, hey, maybe it might be a good idea to understand why these are important, and how they can kind of take the edge off of some of those symptoms. And then I think I would have just mindfulness is you know m- multifaceted, right? So there are other things like progressive muscle relaxation, right? We didn't talk about like body scanning, which is like a consolidated version of some of the ways that we looked at each grounding technique. And so there are other interventions available, but I think I would have just started with like her feelings, saying, hey, you seem resistant, like let's talk about that, and seeing if maybe we would have needed more time to explore that. So we might not have gotten to coping that session, but we would have been able to see like, hey, maybe there's some other things going on that need our attention first. So
Yeah, no, I think those are great ideas. And I think that something that I had noted on that you did really well was kind of being really personable and really transparent and open. And so I think that kind of therapeutic approach would have done really well with some of those components of you. And so being able to just kind of be transparent about like, hey, like it seems like there's some resistance. What's going on? I think you set yourself up really well for that with just kind of some of the rapport that you've built with her. So yeah, great idea.
thank you. I
Can we
appreciate
close with some celebrations? What are some things that you think you did really well?
it. I think I have a good grasp on mindfulness.
Mm-hmm.
I think watching the video, I was like, wow, I didn't realize how comfortable I am with these approaches. Um, and I was even telling my wife the other day, I was like, because I got a chance to do some presentation, and I was like, this gives me a chance. Watching this back gives me a chance to see what I look like doing some of these things, right? And maybe again the psychoeducation part, I think I know we're talking about celebrations, but I think that I kind of made up in some of that and just being able to like execute and explain the skills and why we're using them and how they work. And so I think that's probably the biggest celebration. It's just like, hey, like I think if nothing else, it communicated to the client like, hey, he knows what he's talking about as far as using the skill. So yeah, probably the
Yeah,
biggest.
yeah, absolutely. Can I share some other things that I thought you did really well? I really, and some of these we've named before, so let me find the ones that are new. But I really liked the where was it? Oh, how well you did with kind of summarizing at the beginning some of your clients' thoughts, where I think you like she was just kind of being more specific about like this issue, this thought. And I think you did a good job kind of summarizing it and being like, oh, it sounds like we're having these negative thoughts. Here are some strategies we can use for coping. And I think using some of that language was really helpful because I'm not sure that your client had that language to be able to name kind of what was happening. And so you being able to very clearly say that, I don't even think that you realized that was an intervention. I think you were just kind of doing it. But that was really awesome to be able to see that. I also like that you gave really clear homework, which I know is an important part of mindfulness work, but also you were really clear about it, and kind of at the end we're like, okay, like here's some ways that we can practice this and improve this. And the fire drills I think was great, and there was some good psychoeducation there around how it's not going to just be easy at first to jump into this. And
Mhm.
so having a really clear approach and really clear expectations that are like doable, I think was a really great way to end the session. Having your client feel empowered instead of overwhelmed by some of this stuff. I liked that you did the check-ins after each exercise to kind of in the moment hear where her mind was and how effective the strategies were being. So that was great. Um, I love that you have sense of humor at times, right? Which I guess kind of goes along with the personability we talked about, but you very much seemed like human, even though it was a very like structured session, there was still some humor and personhood in there. And then I liked the just kind of checking in at the end and kind of getting her feedback and not just being like, I told you what to do, go do it, you'll be fine, but more checking in with her around how was that? What was that experience like for you? How are we feeling now? I think all of those were really great, great things that you were able to do in the session. How is it to hear that feedback?
I'm bad at it. I'm bad at it. I guess sometimes like my personal philosophy is like the validating components of it don't help me because I want to be the best, right? And so tell me what I did wrong so that I can fix it and work that it could push me toward being the best. But then it's weird because like that's my mindset, but then every time like I am like validated, like it feels good. And so it's one of those things like it's like I don't like comedy movies. Like I'll never pick one. Like what movie you want to watch? A comedy movie? No. But then I'll go and I'll enjoy it every time. So like why are you so against going to comedy movies when you love them every time you go? So I don't know. Words of affirmation is bittersweet. So, but I
Okay.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no, I appreciate you saying some of that. And I think I hear you that you want to be the best. And so that means hearing the critique so you can do better. But I also think that we need to know what we're doing well so we keep doing it. Right. The whole like if you don't use it, you lose it type of mentality. And I realize that's for like science, but I think some of it applies here too, that if we don't validate the things we're doing well, sometimes we forget to keep doing it. So I want in our sessions together to be able to name those things and be able to name the ways in which we're really being successful. Awesome. Any final thoughts before we close today?
Thank you for your thoughts. I feel like you brought a different perspective to a lot of things. Um, very clearly, I have a tendency to be critical to myself, and so it was nice to hear one of my old professors said constructive, right? Constructive.
Mm,
Definitely felt that from the feedback that you gave me. But also being able to show some things like, hey, like you didn't give enough credit to that. You didn't give enough credit to that. Was encouraging. And so I took some good notes on some of the things that you said, and I will work to apply them. Thank you so much for your time.
yeah, awesome. And I look forward to hearing more about your ongoing work with this client because I think that's you're doing some good stuff and looking forward to seeing the progress along the way. So keep it up and I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye bye.